Welcome to lecture 10. This is a lecture where we discuss a hydrogen oxygen system, and in this we will discuss a chain sequence. So, I had shown you these reactions in one of the previous lectures, but this time we will try to understand this better. So, we are trying to think of a situation where we have a vessel, and in that vessel we are sending hydrogen and oxygen. So, as a hydrogen and oxygen mixture, and let us also say that this is a stoichiometric mixture. It is possible to keep this in some kind of a bath, so that we can set a temperature for this. We can set a temperature for this. So, there is some temperature, and also we can set a pressure, because depending on when we close the valve, we can set the pressure depending on the how long we keep it open, and when we close it, we can build up some pressure inside this. So, there is some pressure and temperature at which this vessel can be charged with a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen in stoichiometric proportion. It does not have to be stoichiometric, but we take this example when hydrogen and oxygen is filled in the spherical vessel here in stoichiometric proportions. So, initially there is nothing, then we send hydrogen oxygen mixture here, and when the pressure builds up to a certain value, we close the valve. So, it has reached some pressure, and also temperature is maintained with the help of a bath. So, it is some pressure and temperature. Now, I am going to show you next an explosion boundary, explosion limit for this case. All right. So, what we have here is pressure as a function of temperature, pressure on the y axis, pressure in millimeter of mercury, and on the y axis, on the x axis you have temperature in degree Celsius, and you also see a curve. This curve gives you explosion limits of a stoichiometric hydrogen oxygen mixture in a spherical vessel. This is from actual data. Now, what do we see? We see explosion written here, no explosion written here, and we have this line on which it says first limit, this line on which it says second limit, and this part of the curve says third limit. This whole thing gives you an explosion boundary. And I will also notice that even though the temperature scale is linear, you can see 400, 420, 440 and stuff like that, the pressure is on a log scale. So, we will remember these and try to now understand what exactly we are trying to study. So, we have hydrogen and oxygen in a spherical vessel in stoichiometric mixture at a certain pressure and temperature, and we are talking about explosion limits. That means we are talking about explosion. So, what is an explosion? Explosion is if you put reactants together. For example, in this case you are putting hydrogen and oxygen together, then they may, not necessarily, but they may react quite violently and give you a very fast reaction rate. And how fast is fast? That is kind of difficult to define, but fast compared to normal time scales that human beings experience. So, it is a very fast reaction, it takes place all over the vessel and the reaction is quite violent. So, that is called an explosion. So, what we saw in that plot was explosion limits. Now, on the plot you also saw pressure versus temperature, pressure on the y axis, temperature on the x axis. So, what are these pressures and temperatures? Let us think about it. If you have a vessel which is a rigid vessel, and if there is explosion taking place, we expect the temperature to change and the pressure to change, because reaction will take place, pressure will build up, that is what you expect. So, what are we plotting in the plot that you just now saw? The pressure and temperature that you saw on the y and x axis respectively are the initial charging conditions. So, initially there is some pressure and some temperature. So, the pressures and temperatures on the plot are not the pressures and temperatures which are reached if an explosion happens. Okay. So, explosion is fast violent reaction taking place all over the vessel, and we are trying to determine the boundaries of the explosion curve. That means, we are trying to see when explosion will happen and when explosion is not going to happen. But we are doing it in terms of the initial charging pressures and temperatures. That means that we fill up the vessel at some pressure and temperature and then see whether explosion happens or not. If it does not happen, it goes to the no explosion zone. If it happens, it goes to the explosion zone on the plot that we looked at. Now, if we change the pressure and temperature, the charging pressure and temperature, maybe this time you will get an explosion happening. If you get an explosion, then it goes to the explosive regime of the plot. Okay. So, to understand this, let us go to the curve that we just now saw. All right. So, this is what I was mentioning. So, this is the temperature at which the vessel is initially charged. This is the pressure at which the vessel is initially charged. So, if the temperature is 480 and the pressure is here, which is about 1.5 millimeter of mercury, then there is no explosion, because that is below this point that I marked is below the first limit. But if the temperature is still 480, but the pressure is 4 millimeter of mercury, then the point is here, then it goes to the explosive regime. How do I know? Because this part is marked as explosion. This has been obtained using some data. So, it says explosion. So, this must be in the explosive regime. But let us say, keeping that same 480 degrees Celsius, if we go to 100 millimeter of mercury, see if we are here, then again there is no explosion, because we are above the second limit, we have crossed over to the no explosion zone. If we go to a very high value of pressure, let us say something like 8000 millimeter of mercury, then again we are crossing the third limit. So, we are going to the explosive regime. So, how are we getting these points? These points are obtained by changing the initial condition. So, these are multiple experiments. The curve that you see in front of you is not the outcome of one experiment, it is the outcome of many experiments. So, we will keep that in mind, and I will just draw a line which goes like this, and we can follow this isotherm. So, this is the isotherm which we want to look at. So, this is 480. I could have chosen anything else, but let us just choose one particular isotherm. So, if it is 480 and if the pressure is like less than 1.5 millimeter of mercury, then there is no explosion. So, that has been experimentally observed. Now, what is the reason behind this? So, we because of studies that have been done by various people, the explanations of all these are available. But let us think about what actually happens in the system, and we have some idea of that. We know that there is a chain initiation. We looked at this a couple of classes back, maybe, or maybe even in the last class also. and then we know that there is chain propagation or branching, and there is also chain termination. In fact, this is not the entire set of reactions, there are few more to come, but right now it is just important to appreciate the fact that when you have hydrogen and when you also have oxygen, maybe hydrogen will break into H plus M starting the chain sequence. So, we call that chain initiation, else it can be H2 plus O2 giving you HO2 plus H at other temperatures. I mean, if the temperature is not that high, then it can be HO2 plus H. HO2 is also a radical, and H of course is hydrogen atom, which is also highly reactive. So, this is the initiation part, and then there will be propagation part, but the propagation is also with branching. And I think we quickly looked at all these reactions some time back, and we identified that some are branching and some are propagation. So, we did that, and there is also chain termination. Now, how are these things ensuring that under certain pressure and temperature conditions there is no explosion, and under certain other pressure and temperature conditions there is explosion? How does that happen? So, if the reactions are always strong, if there is good chain initiation, good propagation, good branching, then you will always get explosion, correct? If these reactions are strong, there is a very good build up of radical pool, then it is always explosive. So, the question is, why is it that we are getting a non-explosive regime and then an explosive regime and then again a non-explosive regime? So, something strange must be happening. Now, if we look at the first limit, for example, the first limit, going back to the curve, the first limit is for low pressures and the temperature is, let us say, 480 for the isotherm that we are following. So, the temperature is not very low. The question is, why does not it react? Because it is below the first limit, so there is no explosion. So, why does not it explode? So, to understand that, let us appreciate that there are two things that are happening. One is, of course, the chemical reaction, chain initiation, propagation, branching, building up of radical pool. There may be some chain termination also happening, but there is this physical thing happening. At low pressures, the radicals which get produced, they easily go to the wall of the vessel and then they get adsorbed there, they get destroyed. Basically, when they go to the wall, they do not remain reactive anymore. So, the active species will tend to go to the wall and get destroyed there. So, that is what is overwhelming the chain reaction. So, there is reaction which is countered by the destruction of radicals at the wall of the vessel. So, whether an explosion will take place or not take place will depend on which one is stronger, because it is a tussle between the two. It is a tussle between the destruction of radicals at the wall and the strength of the radical pool build up and chain initiation, propagation, branching, all these processes. So, which one wins? Obviously, based on our data, we know that at low pressure the process of destruction of radicals actually wins over the process of build up of pool of radicals. So, the explanation for this is the following, that diffusion coefficients are actually inversely proportional to pressure. So, in the main body of the vessel, in the gas phase, these radicals are getting produced, but at low pressures the radicals have higher tendency to go to the wall and get destroyed at lower pressures. Why? Because diffusion coefficients are larger at lower pressures. Diffusion coefficients are typically inversely proportional to pressure. So, we are talking about mass transfer by diffusion. There is more radical at in the main body of the gas, there is less at the wall. So, radicals are getting produced by chain initiation, propagation, branching and all that. At low pressures they will tend to go to the wall and get destroyed. They will not remain reactive anymore. Now, this has also been verified by, this particular theory has also been verified by looking at vessels of different sizes, and the explosion limit does change if you change the vessel size, essentially saying that the amount of destruction of radicals by means of diffusion to the wall changes if you change the vessel diameter. Okay. So, this is the explanation for the first limit. Now, after that there is of course an explosive regime. So, what happens then? The explosive regime means that the destruction of radicals is not very strong now, and that is also something which we have discussed, because as we increase pressure, because we are now following an isotherm at that same 480, at the same 480 degrees Celsius, we are following this isotherm and we are in fact going up, isn't it. So, that means we are going to higher pressures, and if you go to higher pressures you expect the diffusion rates to come down. Okay. So, that is one thing, plus at higher pressures the concentrations are better. So, the increased concentrations will give you higher reaction rates also, and then we will get explosion. The other point that we actually wanted to see from what we learned previously is that with pressure the radical concentrations will increase and the reaction rate also increases. Radical concentrations increase with increase in pressure and the reaction rate also increases. Is that correct? Is this something which you have heard before? This is something that you have heard before. Last class we discussed this. Anybody remembers those? I think maybe I just quickly point out what we wrote last time. We wrote things like this. So, this is for the generic chain sequence we wrote last time. So, you can see that if you increase pressures, then the radical concentration should increase and the reaction rate should also increase, does not it? Again, just very quickly refresh what happens if you increase the pressure. What happens to concentrations? Concentrations will also go up, because that we did last time, ideal gas and all that. We are talking about gas reactions primarily. We have not, so far we are not talking, we have not talked about reactions like oxidation of coal, where the oxygen goes into the matrix of the coal and then the solid coal, the carbon of the solid coal reacts with the gaseous oxygen, or other kinds of heterogeneous reactions. These are heterogeneous reactions where there is a reactant in the solid phase and there is a reactant in the gaseous phase, typically the oxidizer in the gaseous phase and the fuel in the solid phase. That is also possible. We talked about these soot particles in a candle flame which get oxidized near the tip of the flame, the upper part of the flame, because it is getting air. So, we are not talking about those kind of reactions, we are talking about primarily gaseous reactions now. So, we had done all this, we had said that okay, the concentration and pressure are related, and we wrote an expression for that last time. So, using these two that you see here, the radical concentration and the reaction rate will both increase with pressure. Okay. So, why am I mentioning this? Because remember our curve, this is our curve, and in this curve, as you increase the pressure, it became explosive. So, the radical concentrations and the reaction rates have all gone up. So, you have strengthened the reactive part. What about the part which was, what about the mechanism which was countering the reaction? That is the destruction of radicals at the wall, that will come down because diffusion coefficients are inversely proportional to pressure and you have increased the pressure. So, that is the logic. So, we have understood why it has become explosive in this regime. But then that is not the end of the story, it is still quite interesting. So, you got a second limit. So, you got again no explosion, again the explosion disappears. So, why does that happen? This has an explanation in terms of the equations, in terms of the reactions that we have. So, we have, for example, this one. We have this important reaction here, H plus O2 giving you O plus OH. Okay. So, this is what sort of a reaction? This one. This particular one, H plus O2 giving you O plus OH, this is a branching reaction. So, this is important for explosion to happen. Now, as long as we have crossed the first limit and we are in the explosive regime, this reaction is in fact very strong, and this helps subsequent reactions because it helps in building the pool of radicals. But it has a competitor also. The competitor comes here. So, that competitor is this reaction H plus O2 plus M giving you HO2 plus M. So, beyond a certain pressure this reaction becomes important. So, I think maybe it is better if I write these things at one place rather than showing all equations together. So, I am talking about a competition now, another competition. So, this is one reaction. This versus this. So, this one is good for the explosion, the first one. Yeah, because it is branching. What about the second one? What sort of a reaction is this? Yeah, so the point here is that H plus O2 plus M, in this H is a radical, in fact HO2 is also a radical. Okay. But HO2 is much less reactive than H under the conditions that we are considering. So, HO2 is a hydroperoxy radical and we are considering this sort of situation, we are considering this part here. So, this is a certain pressure range going from maybe 30 millimeter of mercury to about 5000 millimeter of mercury. For this entire range HO2 is not all that reactive. So, even though this is essentially this is still one radical on the left hand side and one radical on the right hand side, but it is effectively like a termination reaction under the conditions that we have. So, it goes to the non explosive regime. and this reaction H plus O2 plus M is a 3 body reaction. Okay. So, if since it has 3 bodies, its rate is more sensitive to pressure and it will increase faster if you increase pressure. Okay. Does that make sense? So, what I just now said is that if you are talking about this H plus O2 plus M, this rate will increase significantly with pressure, correct? What is the reason for that? And why does it have a stronger dependence on pressure? So, we are talking about this competition where there is a 2 body reaction competing with a 3 body reaction. Which one will increase faster with pressure? Second one. Why? Because in its reaction rate you will have concentration of H, concentration of O2, concentration of M all multiplied together. So, you have 3 things multiplied together, and if you have a 2 body reaction you have 2 concentrations multiplied together. So, that will have a lower dependence on pressure. Okay. So, that is what was happening. So, in this regime H plus O2 giving you O plus OH, that branching reaction was very good. Okay. And its competitor is this one. Its competitor was not that good because the pressure was still low. Okay. Once the pressure became higher, this became stronger, and this HO2 is not very reactive. So, effectively this becoming stronger means it goes towards a non-explosive regime. Okay. So, that is what was happening. All right. But after that what happens? So, the mystery is still there because it has again gone to an explosive regime. So, there is a third limit also. So, what happens then? So, here the pressure is still higher. At those higher pressures, that HO2 part also starts reacting. In this regime that HO2 part was not very reactive, but if you cross this limit, this part, then the HO2 starts becoming reactive and some more reaction sequences open up. So, then it becomes explosive again. Okay. So, this is the picture. So, HO2 is a hydroperoxy radical and H2O2 is hydrogen peroxide. So, these things will show up here. So, now this HO2 has become reactive once you cross the third limit. So, then you see all this sequence of reactions opening up. So, HO2 has now started doing things. So, for example, this HO2 now combines with H. H is already available in the system in the gas phase somewhere. So, it reacts with that to give you OH plus OH. So, it is giving you 2 OH radicals. So, that is good, and similarly it gives you O atom here. So, it does all kinds of things. Here it gives you OH. So, all this set of reactions open up, which again this particular set makes the system reactive, makes the system explosive. Actually, it is always reactive, but it makes it explosive. Alright, again you do not have to write all this, because I will make these available to you later. So, going back to this again, I just want to highlight what I said at the beginning, that you should not think that we are holding the temperature at 480 degrees Celsius and in a given experiment increasing pressure. So, we are not doing that, that is okay with everybody. These are multiple experiments. So, every time we are changing the initial condition, we are observing whether explosion is taking place or not taking place. So, depending on where you are in terms of pressure and temperature, you can have non-explosive, explosive, non-explosive, explosive regime. Okay. So, we understand that the first limit is because the radicals are getting destroyed at the wall very easily at low pressures, because at low pressures the diffusion coefficient is large. So, pool of radicals are getting formed, they are quickly getting destroyed at the wall, no reaction here. After that, if your initial pressure temperature is such that pressure is reasonably high, at least not very low, then the wall destruction part goes down. Branching reactions, propagation reactions, they have also increased, because as you increase pressure, you have increased reaction rates and radical concentrations. How do we know that? From the analysis that we did in the last class, for that hypothetical A2 plus B2 giving you AB, that sort of situation. I just few minutes back I had shown you that expression is, if you increase pressure, these things are going to go up, right. So, we understand this, and what happens after you cross the second limit, why does it become non-explosive again? That is because of this competition that we spoke of, right. So, there was this competition between this branching reaction and this 3-body reaction, which was essentially a termination reactions for the range of pressures and temperatures that we are considering. So, if it is non-explosive, then this means this is winning. And why is this winning? What did we say then? 3-body. So, it has got higher rate of increase of its rate as you increase pressure. So, now this dominates over this reaction, okay, and then you go into a non-explosive regime. And finally, why do we get a third limit? Why does it become explosive again? Because the HO2 now starts opening up, okay. So, it becomes explosive again. So, we are analyzing this to learn something about chemical mechanisms, that is one purpose, because I have been discussing chain mechanisms, but we just did A2 plus B2 giving you AB and that sort of hypothetical stuff. But here you now see that really there is chain initiation, propagation, branching, chain termination, and these things are all important in deciding what you will get. Whether you will get an explosive reaction or not, that depends on what pressure and temperature you have and what those pressures and temperatures do to the chain mechanism. Which reactions get triggered, which reactions are stronger, things like that. Now, let me also clarify that just because it is explosive does not mean that when it is not explosive, it is not reacting at all. I do not mean that. Okay. So, for example, in the below the first limit, it is still reacting. It is still reacting a little bit, because it is producing those radicals. It is not inert. It is producing those radicals, which is nevertheless going to the wall and getting destroyed. If you change the material of the vessel wall, suppose you make it of glass, you make it of palladium, make it of something else, some other metal, the rate of destruction of radicals changes. So, the limit in fact changes. So, that means that radicals are getting destroyed, but it also means that radicals are getting produced. If they are not produced, then they would not have got destroyed. There is no question of, in that case, the limit depending on the vessel diameter or the material of the vessel. So, reactions are taking place. So, it will not be proper for us to think that if it is non-explosive, then it is not reacting at all. It is reacting, but reacting much more slowly. Okay. So, there is some radical pool that is building up, but much of that is getting destroyed also. So, that is one important aspect that we learned from here. The other important aspect is that we now understand that if I tell you that, okay, I have got hydrogen and oxygen in stoichiometric proportion in a vessel, you are likely to tell me that hydrogen and oxygen will react and give you H2O, as if it will always happen. I mean, you will tend to think that if you have a certain pressure and a certain temperature, maybe it will either not react or it will react, but once it starts reacting at a certain pressure, maybe if you increase temperature, it will still keep on reacting. So, suppose some pressure and temperature, hydrogen and oxygen put together, stoichiometric proportions, reaction is taking place. You will tend to think that if you increase the temperature, the reaction will still become more vigorous and things like that, right. But of course, it does not happen that way, it may not happen that way. We tend to think that hydrogen and oxygen put together, it will have some reaction, and if you increase the temperature, reaction will go up and more water will get produced and things like that. That is because we are thinking just in terms of 2H2 plus O2 giving you 2H2. Okay. But that is just the overall mass balance, that is not how reactions proceed. Reaction has all these multiple elementary reactions interacting with one another, some becoming stronger, some becoming weaker depending on the pressure and the temperature that you have. Okay. So, this tells you the subtlety of chemical reactions, which otherwise we would not have thought of, because we are used to writing propane plus oxygen plus nitrogen giving you CO2 plus H2O, we are used to writing hydrogen plus oxygen giving us water. Okay. So, all that does not hold properly. So, this is one lesson that we learned from here. Okay. Few more things. One is that all right, what about the shape of this one? So, this has this particular shape. So, that means if we chose another isotherm, it would have given a similar trend. Okay. Suppose the isotherm was here, maybe I should draw another isotherm, maybe blue one, and you can imagine some isotherm here. You can think of some isotherm which is a little bit on the right hand side also. So, we chose one isotherm, but we could have chosen some other isotherm. We could have chosen some other isotherm. So, if you choose this blue, the trend would have been similar. No explosion, explosion, no explosion, explosion. Only thing is the distance between the two limits would have changed. Okay. And what do you see? If you go from the red to the blue, what has changed? What decreases? Temperature has increased. So, from 480 you got to 540. Non-explosive regime has decreased. Okay. So, with increase in temperature, overall things get better. Okay. And one of the reasons for that is that this reaction which we are talking about, H plus O2 plus M giving you HO2 plus M, the rate of this is a little complex. It does not really follow an Arrhenius reaction rate, and the rate constant of that in fact comes down little bit. Rate constant of this reaction, this three body reaction, comes down a little bit if you increase temperature. Okay. So, this is not strict, this is not really Arrhenius kind of form. Arrhenius is the predominant form that we are interested in, but for this kind of a reaction, the reaction rate constant in fact goes down with temperature. So, if it goes down with temperature, this was a culprit, it was stopping explosions from taking place. So, if that is the case, then you, as you move towards the right, as you are increasing the temperature, you will tend to get more explosion, because this was spoiling the game, right. So, you can imagine if you go out of the frame here, this particular plot I have taken from Stephen Turns's book. This only gives you the line at 580, which just touches the curve here, tangential to the curve here almost. But if you go further right, it is all explosive. It is all explosive because that H plus O2 plus M, that reaction becomes weaker, because the temperature is higher. So, that reaction becomes weaker, and at higher temperatures H plus O2 giving you OH plus O, that was the main branching reaction which was helping. H plus O2 giving you OH plus O, that was the main branching reaction which was helping the explosion process. That gets even stronger if it is higher temperature, okay, because that is a usual two body reaction, rate of which will definitely increase with temperature. So, you get no boundaries then. If you go far to the right, maybe 600 degree Celsius, it is all explosive. Similarly, the other dashed line that I had drawn, below 400 degree Celsius, it is all non-explosive. Okay, so, the temperature is not really high. But remember that whenever you look at this, keep in mind this is not one experiment. So, this just helps you find out what happens if you choose a different initial pressure and temperature conditions. Once you choose the pressure and temperature condition, if explosion happens, how does the pressure change, how does the temperature change, that answer is not from here. Okay. So, that is important. Now, what we will do is we will also take a look at few other chemical mechanisms. We will do a very simple one, simple but quite important. So, we have CO oxidation. CO oxidation will take place if there is a hydrocarbon combustion taking place. When a hydrocarbon burns, in an intermediate phase there is carbon monoxide produced, and that carbon monoxide can get oxidized to CO2. So, this is also interesting in the sense that we tend to think that carbon monoxide gets oxidized to CO2 with the help of O2. Okay. If somebody asks you how do you get CO2 from CO, you will tend to think that it is CO plus O2 giving you CO2, isn't it? CO plus half O2 giving you CO2, that is what you will tend to think, but it does not happen that way. So, let us look at what we have here. You have CO plus O2 of course giving you CO2 plus O, this sort of thing happens. Okay. CO does get converted to CO2, but there is an O which is released. So, this is a slow reaction, this is an initiation reaction, but then that O reacts with H2O to give you OH plus OH. This is what sort of a reaction? Branching reaction, this is a branching reaction. So, you got plenty of OH now, hydroxyl radical, and that hydroxyl radical can now attack that CO to give you CO2 and H, and this is the most important reaction, this is the key reaction. And then it is producing H, so that H will also react with O2 to give you OH and O. What do we learn from here? We learn that if we have CO and if we have dry air, absolutely dry air or dry oxygen, then CO plus O2 reaction is going to be slow. CO getting converted to CO2 will be rather slow if CO is burning in the presence of, if CO is asked to react with oxygen or or air which does not have any moisture or any hydrogen containing element. Okay, if it is just pure oxygen, or if it is just, I mean just oxygen without any moisture, or maybe just air without any moisture, very dry, then the CO plus O2 will give you CO2 plus O, but this is slow. Whereas if there is some hydrogen containing species present, let us say there is moisture present. So, the moisture here, this is H2O, will give you OH radical, and that OH radical is responsible for converting this carbon monoxide to CO2 in a reaction which is faster. So, this is the key reaction. So, what do you want to happen if you are trying to burn, if you are trying to oxidize CO? You want to have at least some moisture in the air, okay, then the reaction will be really fast. If CO is with very dry air, then the reaction rate is small. Now, this can be tested also. If you have CO with air and the air is really dry, then the propagation of a flame, CO with air, this is like a premixed situation. You can ignite that, you can get a flame which propagates, but that flame propagation will be really weak, because it is depending on this reaction, CO plus O2 giving you CO2 plus O, which is slow. But air typically has moisture, and even a small amount of moisture will make that flame propagate really fast, much faster. So, what I was saying is it does not have to be a flame propagation situation, but if we think about, okay, let me so if we think about this sort of a situation, if you have CO plus half O2 or something, then if you ignite it, you get a flame maybe, but if there is no moisture, if there is no hydrogen containing thing, it will move very slowly. Okay. If you add even a small amount of moisture, then it will start moving faster. The other point that I wanted to make is that even if water is not present, but hydrogen is present, suppose there is some hydrogen. So, you have carbon monoxide which has got a little bit of hydrogen in there. Carbon monoxide plus hydrogen will make sure that hydrogen will make sure that there is supply of OH radical, and that will again participate in this key reaction which I mentioned. So, it will still be fast. All right, now why are we studying CO oxidation? CO oxidation is important in its own right, because in combustion processes CO will get produced. If you are burning a hydrocarbon, CO is an intermediate product, CO will come, CO will appear somewhere in the whole sequence of reactions of hydrocarbon combustion. CO will appear, and that CO will get oxidized to CO2 also. Will you have moisture? Typically yes, because the hydrocarbon is burning, so it will produce moisture anyway. Okay. It will have hydrogen. So, that CO oxidation will be in the presence of hydrogen containing species like hydrogen itself or water vapor, and that reaction rate will be fast. So, a significant portion of the energy that we get by burning hydrocarbons does come from burning CO also. Okay. So, CO is a contributor there. So, that is why we are studying it. In case you are wondering about anything else, let us see, O2 is present. So, this gives you O. H2O is present because maybe it has come, it was there in the air, or maybe it is produced in the combustion process. So, it is there, and okay, this gives you OH, right. I think it is easier to think about this in the context of a whole combustion reaction of a hydrocarbon. So, this is CO oxidation. And the other interesting topic which we will look at is, we will not be able to complete today maybe, but this is oxides of nitrogen formation. So, this is NOx.
So, which element is reacting faster or which is slower? Do we analyze only with the experiments, or we have some physical analysis also, like energy of formation, activation energy, all those things, with which we can say that this reaction will be faster than this?
Okay, the question is, can we say by means of some calculations whether some reaction is faster, some reaction is slower. So, obviously, if you do experiments, you will know. And what sort of experiments? Maybe chemists can do some of these experiments. They indeed do these experiments. They have already done these experiments. So, they can tell you, if you put CO and O2 together, what is the reaction rate? Based on that, we said CO plus O2 giving you CO2 plus O is slow, because somebody has given the reaction rate. Similarly, there is other reaction where we have the OH reaction, which we call the key reaction. CO plus OH, we said CO2 plus H is the key reaction. So, there also somebody has measured these reaction rates. Now, your question is, can we do some calculations? Now, the problem there is that, okay, you can, but the kind of calculations that you are thinking of, for example, in terms of the energetics of the reaction. Okay. So, if we try to do that, it will be difficult, number one. But if you can do some thermodynamics, for example, if you know if there are a forward reaction and there is a reverse reaction also, and let us say you know the rate of the forward reaction from measurements, then we have already learned that maybe with the help of an equilibrium constant we can get the backward reaction rate constant. You can do such things to reduce your number of measurements of to reduce your dependence on the reaction rates determined by chemists. So, you can do such kind of calculations, but there is no other direct way of saying that, okay, from thermodynamics this will be faster. You know why? Because thermodynamics, the classical thermodynamics that we know, it does not really talk about rates, is not it? It is about equilibrium, whereas this chemical kinetics is about rates. So, remember the sequence in which we discussed, we said complete combustion, then we said no, maybe we will try chemical equilibrium. So, chemical equilibrium was the limit to which thermodynamics could take us. So, we learned to use that calculator, we get all this composition of the mixture and things like that. But there in your calculator, if you remember, it does not say anywhere which reaction is taking place and how fast those reactions are taking place, none of that. Okay. So, we will not be able to use thermodynamics to do this, but thermodynamics can be used to, as I illustrated, to get maybe reverse reaction rate constants, things like that. It might help in some way, that is all. But we do not have to depend on the kind of data that we get from chemists all the time. As I said, if you can do an experiment in the lab with CO with small amount of hydrogen, and if you can see how flames propagate in that, and we have done those experiments in our lab. So, CO with small amount of hydrogen, we put that in a reaction vessel, we burn it, we give a spark, and then there is a flame which propagates, and we, with the help of a high speed camera, we can image the flame and we can see how fast the flame is propagating. So, if you have very small amount of hydrogen, then the flame is really slowly propagating, because that is more like carbon monoxide in the presence of dry air. With very small amount of hydrogen with carbon monoxide, it is almost like carbon monoxide with dry air, and the rate of reaction is slow. Consequently, the flame which propagates is also slow. So, what I am saying is it is not a chemist sort of experiment, but we can do our experiments to see and verify some of these things that I told you. For example, dry air is not very helpful when oxidizing carbon monoxide. Okay, so I will not have time to discuss oxides of nitrogen formation, but I just show a little bit of that, because you already have some exposure to this. We in fact discussed this a little bit. We did not call it by this name, but the most important mechanism for nitric oxide formation for fuels which do not contain any nitrogen. Fuels can sometimes contain nitrogen, coal can contain nitrogen, for example. For those fuels, a thermal or Zeldovich mechanism is very important, and these first two reactions are familiar to you. Correct? First two are familiar to you? I mean, did we see this before? O plus N2 giving you NO plus N? Yeah, we have seen that. But that time we did not use a double headed arrow, we used a single headed arrow. So, we just spoke about one reaction, but in reality there is a reverse reaction also, there is a backward reaction also. So, remember the analysis that we did in that, I was just trying to illustrate that you can apply steady state approximation for a real system, and you can write a rate of reaction in global terms. We wrote an expression for ddt of NO. We did all that. To illustrate that, I did write these first two reactions, not this one, but I wrote these two reactions, but only the forward reaction rate. What was the logic behind that? Why did I write only the first one, only the forward one? I am just trying, just asking you to recollect what I said that time. Any idea? I said that in the early stages you can get away by writing just the forward reaction rate, because there is not much formation of NO to begin with. Okay. So, you can do this. Where is the O coming from? I can understand that you will have N2. Where is the O coming from? Again, it is helpful if you think about it in terms of a larger system where there is a combustion taking place, and then oxygen is dissociating and oxygen is giving you O atoms, and then O is attacking N2. Quite often when we are burning something, for example, even in engines, we are concerned about whether NOx is getting produced or not. So, that there is a hydrocarbon which is burning. So, that gives you those O atoms, and those O atoms can strike the nitrogen, and then we get NO plus N. And if you remember, we did discuss that the first reaction, the forward reaction of the first one is slow because of the high activation energy of that. I even wrote those numbers, isn't it? So, this set is called the Zeldovich mechanism, thermal or Zeldovich mechanism of nitric oxide production, but there is an additional reaction also, and I think we will take this up in the next class. Thank you.